The sun rose gently over Maple Creek, painting the quiet cul-de-sac in gold. Birds chirped over manicured lawns, sprinklers ticked in rhythm, and the morning hum of garbage trucks echoed faintly in the distance. Ethan stepped out onto his porch, coffee mug in one hand, rolling his garbage bins to the curb with the other. He had done this every Thursday for years, same time, same place. He adjusted his glasses, smiled as the truck rounded the corner, and gave the collectors a friendly wave. But instead of stopping, the truck rolled right past his house, the engine rumbling like a final insult. Ethan blinked, confused, then called out, "Hey, you missed mine!" The truck slowed, and one of the workers leaned out from the window. His face carried that apologetic look of someone forced into nonsense. "Sorry, sir," he shouted back. "You flagged your address. We're not allowed to pick up from here anymore?" Ethan stood frozen for a second, unsure he'd heard right. The engine roared again as the truck turned down the next street, picking up every neighbor's trash except his. He looked down at his two overflowing bins, lids half open, a faint stench of spoiled leftovers and damp cardboard filling the air. A light chuckle floated from across the street. Ethan turned and saw Karen, the HOA president, standing in her perfectly trimmed garden. Her pink suit gleamed under the sun, her pearl earrings catching the light as she misted her roses with a shiny silver spray bottle. She looked up just long enough to smirk before turning her back, humming as if nothing had happened. Ethan exhaled sharply, glancing at his bins again. A fly buzzed past his ear, landing on the rim of a trash bag. "Flagged my address?" he muttered under his breath. "For what?" He walked back toward his porch, his coffee now cold, the calm morning suddenly heavier. The faint sound of the garbage truck echoed again in the distance, fading away, leaving behind nothing but the hum of sprinklers and the sour smell of his uncollected trash. Ethan couldn't shake the irritation all morning. By noon, the smell from his bins had grown unbearable, a sour mix of old food, damp cardboard, and summer heat. He finally grabbed his car keys, muttering under his breath, and drove straight to the HOA office. The building sat at the end of Maple Creek's community center, spotless white walls, trimmed hedges, and a sign that read, "Maintaining Neighborhood Excellence since 2002. Inside, the air was cool and artificial, scented faintly with lavender. Behind the counter sat Karen, the HOA president, in the same pink suit as always. Her hair was perfectly curled, her smile just a little too wide. "Well, look who finally stopped by," she said sweetly, setting down her coffee cup. "How can the association assist you today, Ethan?" He forced a polite tone. "My trash wasn't picked up this morning. The truck driver said my address was flagged by the HOA. Can you explain why?" Karen's fake smile didn't fade, it only tightened. She flipped through a stack of papers on her clipboard, pretending to search. "Ah, yes," she said at last, tapping the page. "Your bins. They've been repeatedly left out in plain view. It's unsightly. A violation of our neighborhood aesthetic standards." Ethan blinked, incredulous. "Unsightly? Karen, they're trash bins. Everyone leaves theirs by the curb. That's how pickup works." She gave a soft, condescending chuckle. "Well, not everyone, Ethan. We're encouraging homeowners to build decorative enclosures, to keep things tidy. You'll need to construct one before service can resume. Or if you prefer," she shrugged lightly, "you can make alternative disposal arrangements." Ethan frowned. "Alternative disposal? You mean drive my garbage to the dump every week?" "That's ridiculous." Karen leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice with mock sympathy. "Maybe if you kept your property cleaner, the HOA wouldn't have to step in." That hit like a slap. Ethan stared at her, the smugness, the satisfaction just barely hidden behind her rehearsed tone. He wanted to argue, to tell her off right there in the spotless little office. But he saw her hand move to her clipboard again, already jotting something down. "Another note," she said without looking up. "For non-compliance." Ethan exhaled sharply, his patience snapping. "You know what, Karen? This is insane." He turned and walked out before she could reply. The door clicked behind him, her perfume lingering in the air like poison. As he stepped back into the sun, the glare hit his eyes, and across the street, a neighbor was laughing with the mailman, their bins proudly sitting in full view. No notes, no violations. No problem. He gritted his teeth and muttered, "Yeah, definitely personal." Back inside the office, Karen wrote another mark on her clipboard, smiling faintly as she whispered, "Violation confirmed." ChatGPT said days slipped by like hot syrup, slow, sticky, and suffocating. Every morning, the smell grew worse. What started as a faint odor now hit Ethan the moment he opened his front door. Rotten fruit, damp cardboard, spoiled meat, all simmering under the relentless sun. The trash bins were overflowing, bags stacked around them like a barricade of defeat. Flies swarmed, buzzing incessantly, their wings glinting in the light. Even raccoons started visiting at night, leaving torn garbage across his yard like some kind of mocking confetti. Inside, Ethan's mom tried to keep things light, but it was getting to her too. One afternoon, while she was watering her plants by the window, she coughed and waved her hand in front of her nose. "Ethan, sweetheart," she said gently, "this can't go on much longer. It's starting to smell like a landfill out there." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I know, Mom. I called the HOA again. They said nothing will change until I comply with the enclosure policy." She frowned.
"That woman."
"She's doing this on purpose." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because right at that moment, he noticed movement across the street. Karen, dressed in her immaculate pink suit and oversized sun hat, was walking briskly toward his house. Clipboard in hand, Ethan stepped out to meet her halfway. "Morning, Karen," he said flatly. "Here to help me fix the issue you created?" She ignored the jab and took a deep sniff, then exaggeratedly covered her nose with a tissue. "Ethan, this odor is unacceptable. The community has filed multiple complaints. You're officially in violation of Section 14B, improper waste management." Before he could respond, she bent down, taped a laminated paper to his mailbox, and stepped back proudly. In bold letters, it read, "Notice of violation. Excessive trash. $500 fine." Ethan stared at it, his anger bubbling up. "You're fining me for trash you refuse to let me get rid of?" Karen smiled thinly. "Rules are rules. The HOA exists to protect property values. Maybe this will motivate you to take action." She turned and strutted away, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. As she disappeared back into the pristine white HOA office, Ethan looked around. Neighbors were peeking from behind curtains. One man shook his head sympathetically. Another just looked annoyed, waving away the smell. By sunset, Ethan sat on his porch, watching the sky turn orange behind the HOA building. His mom stepped out beside him, setting down 2 cups of iced tea. The air was heavy with the stench of decay. He stared at the growing pile of black garbage bags, his jaw tightening. The camera slowly zooms in, his eyes filled with quiet fury. The morning light creeps across Maple Creek, warm and soft, but Ethan is already awake, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by coffee mugs, papers, and the thick HOA handbook. He flips through it slowly, his eyes scanning the endless pages of regulations, penalties, and fine print. The clock ticks softly in the background. Every few seconds, he glances toward the overflowing trash bins outside the window, the smell faint even from inside. He exhales, frustrated, but keeps reading. He reaches a page buried deep in the waste management section. The words catch his eye. "All waste generated within HOA boundaries shall be collected, processed, or disposed of by HOA-approved services." He reads it twice, then a third time. A slow grin spreads across his face. So if trash piles up, he murmurs to himself, it's their problem. He leans back, a small flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he feels in control. The same rules Karen used to humiliate him might now be her undoing. That afternoon, Ethan steps outside, determined. He starts by walking over to his neighbor Dave's garage, where the older man is sorting tools. Dave wipes his hands on a rag. "Hey, Ethan, you still dealing with that garbage nonsense?" Ethan nods, smiling faintly. "Yeah, but I think I found a way to make it." "Educational," Dave chuckles. "That sounds like trouble." "Not trouble," Ethan says. "Just balance." Later, word spreads quietly. Ethan talks to a few other neighbors, people who've all been on the wrong side of Karen's clipboard. There's Mrs. Bell, fined for hanging her wind chimes. The Garcias who got a warning because their mailbox paint wasn't beige enough. Everyone's tired. By late afternoon, Ethan's driveway looks like a recycling depot. Bags, boxes, old furniture, even a cracked toilet someone brought from 2 streets over. The camera pans across the mess, sunlight hitting the white HOA sign in the background like an omen. Ethan ties another bag, wipes sweat off his forehead and mutters, "This is for every pointless fine." He documents everything with his phone, addresses, timestamps, and short clips of neighbors dropping off trash. His hands move fast but careful. Organized chaos. He even prints the HOA clause that makes them responsible. As evening falls, the sound of crickets mixes with the rustle of plastic bags. Ethan loads everything into a small trailer hitched to his old pickup. The headlights stay off as he drives slowly toward the HOA office, that spotless little building at the end of Maple Creek. With trimmed hedges and the shiny gold letters, Maple Creek Homeowners Association. He parks a short distance away, engine idling. The camera catches his reflection in the rear-view mirror, calm, almost amused. His eyes flick toward the HOA office door. "You wanted control, Karen," he whispers. "Now you're going to have all the control you can handle." He steps out, breath visible in the cool night air, and looks toward the mountain of trash behind him. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler clicks on, the sound oddly peaceful. Ethan smiles faintly. Voiceover, "She used their rules to punish me." But I realize something. When you follow their rules better than they do, you don't break the system. You bury them in it. He stands in the quiet street for a moment longer, the glow from the streetlights bouncing off black plastic bags piled high. The camera lingers on his expression, calm, satisfied, ready. Tomorrow morning, Maple Creek would wake up to a new smell, one the HOA could never fine him for. The sky is still dark when Ethan's old pickup rolls quietly out of his driveway, headlights dimmed. The trailer behind him rattles softly, packed tight with dozens of overstuffed garbage bags. Broken furniture and old junk from around Maple Creek. The neighborhood sleeps, silent except for the faint hum of cicadas and the whisper of the engine. Ethan's face is calm, focused, illuminated only by the soft blue glow of his dashboard. He drives slowly past the neat rows of identical houses, manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, perfect symmetry, the kind of perfection Karen Thornfield lives for. But tonight, perfection is about to meet payback. He stops first near the HOA office. The building sits smugly under a street lamp, spotless and white, like a symbol of authority. Ethan steps out quietly, his boots crunching on gravel. He grabs a heavy black bag, hoists it over his shoulder, and drops it right in front of the gleaming gold letters that read, Maple Creek Homeowners Association. It lands with a wet thud, one by one. He adds more, layer after layer of trash until the entire front sign disappears beneath a mountain of plastic, cardboard, and rotting food. The smell of old fruit and damp grass begins to spread. He steps back, hands on hips, and lets out a quiet laugh. Then, with the precision of someone who's planned this for weeks, he drives toward Karen Thornfield's house. Her lawn glows faintly under her porch lights, every blade of grass trimmed, every flower perfectly placed. The small white dog from earlier snoozes by the door. Ethan parks at the curb, cuts the engine, and starts unloading again. Trash bags line her walkway like dark trophies. He even arranges a few around her mailbox, carefully positioning them so they don't touch her property. Just close enough to make a statement. As he works, he whispers under his breath, "You wanted me to clean up, Karen. Well, here's cleanup day." He documents everything with his phone, the time, the address, the bags, evidence that every piece of trash came from within HOA boundaries, legally airtight. By the time he's done, the sun is just starting to rise, painting the sky orange and pink. The neighborhood begins to stir. Birds chirp. Somewhere a dog barks. And then, the door to Karen's house bursts open. She stands there in her pink tracksuit, hair in disarray, holding a cup of coffee. The steam from her mug meets the stench of garbage, and her face twists in disgust. Her dog starts barking frantically as she steps outside, her slippers squishing in a puddle of leaking trash water. "What is this?" "What is this?" she screams, waving her arms. Her voice echoes down the street. A few neighbors peek out their windows. Some step outside with phones in hand. One starts filming. Laughter spreads as Karen's furious commands turn to chaos. She yells for her husband, then calls the HOA cleaning crew, but no one moves fast enough. The workers arrive, faces covered with masks, trying to push through the towering heap. One slips, another gags. Karen storms toward the HOA office next, only to find it buried under the same garbage mountain. The gold letters are gone, replaced by a sagging mess of leaking trash bags. "Get this cleaned up now," she shouts, her voice cracking. But the smell is overwhelming, sour, chemical, suffocating. A few neighbors cheer from across the street. Someone yells, "Guess the HOA's got some trash to take out." Karen spins around, furious, her pink tracksuit smeared with something unidentifiable. She grabs a bag to move it herself. It bursts open, splattering her shoes with sticky brown sludge. She screams, stumbling backward, slipping on the wet pavement and landing flat on her back. Laughter erupts from the small crowd now gathered nearby. Cameras flash. A few even live stream the scene. Minutes later, a fire truck rolls in, lights flashing red and blue. Someone had called, reporting a chemical spill. Firefighters step out, masks on, assessing the mess. They find no chemicals, just trash, stench, and pride burning hotter than any fire. Ethan watches quietly from down the street, standing beside his truck, hood pulled up. He doesn't smile, not yet. He just watches as Karen argues with firefighters, yelling about property values while standing knee-deep in garbage. Phones rang endlessly inside the HOA office, one after another like an alarm that wouldn't stop. The smell from the trash mountain had drifted down the street, seeping into nearby yards. Angry residents crowded the entrance, holding their noses and demanding answers. A group of mothers with strollers stood by the door, shouting about the stench and the rats they'd started seeing that morning. Inside, Karen frantically waved her clipboard, barking orders at two board members who looked ready to quit. "This is vandalism," she snapped, her voice cracking. "That man dumped trash all over HOA property. Call sanitation, call legal, let's call somebody." But the internet had already beaten her to it. On the community Facebook group, a live video of the HOA office surrounded by piles of garbage was trending. Comments flooded in faster than Karen could delete them. "Serves them right. Maybe now they'll stop bullying people. Is that Karen slipping in her own rules?" By noon, local residents were tagging the HOA page with memes of garbage bags wearing little crowns labeled HOA Queen. Karen's face turned red every time a new notification pinged on her phone. In a last-ditch effort, she tried to twist the story. She typed a long post claiming Ethan had violated waste management ordinances and endangered public health. But it backfired immediately. Residents replied with screenshots of the HOA rulebook, the very section Ethan had used against her. "Actually, Karen," one neighbor wrote, "he just followed your own regulations. Maybe try reading them next time." The boardroom descended into chaos. One of the older members sighed and said quietly, "We can't win this one." The entire neighborhood's watching. Another board member nodded toward the window. And the press, too. Out front, a local reporter was already setting up a camera, narrating the unbelievable story of a homeowners association buried, literally, under its own trash. Meanwhile, Ethan sat on his porch just a few houses down, calm and collected, a mug of coffee in his hand, a half-smile on his face. The faint hum of engines echoed from the street as the city sanitation trucks finally arrived. This time, heading straight toward the HOA office. He watched as men in reflective vests began shoveling and hauling the piles of garbage into their trucks. Karen stood helplessly on the curb, her pink suit stained and wilted in the heat. Ethan took a slow sip of his coffee and muttered under his breath, just loud enough for himself to hear. "Guess they finally picked up the trash." Phones rang endlessly inside the HOA office, one after another, like an alarm that wouldn't stop. The smell from the trash mountain had drifted down the street, seeping into nearby yards. Angry residents crowded the entrance, holding their noses and demanding answers. A group of mothers with strollers stood by the door, shouting about the stench and the rats they'd started seeing that morning. Inside, Karen frantically waved her clipboard, barking orders at two board members who looked ready to quit. "This is vandalism," she snapped, her voice cracking. "That man dumped trash all over HOA property. Call sanitation, call legal, call somebody." But the internet had already beaten her to it. On the community Facebook group, a live video of the HOA office surrounded by piles of garbage was trending. Comments flooded in faster than Karen could delete them. Serves them right. Maybe now they'll stop bullying people. Is that Karen slipping in her own rules? By noon, local residents were tagging the HOA page with memes of garbage bags wearing little crowns labeled HOA Queen. Karen's face turned red every time a new notification pinged on her phone. In a last-ditch effort, she tried to twist the story. She typed a long post claiming Ethan had violated waste management ordinances and endangered public health. But it backfired immediately. Residents replied with screenshots of the HOA rulebook, the very section Ethan had used against her. "Actually, Karen," one neighbor wrote, "he just followed your own regulations. Maybe try reading them next time." The boardroom descended into chaos. One of the older members sighed and said quietly, "We can't win this one. The entire neighborhood's watching." Another board member nodded toward the window. "And the press, too. Out front, a local reporter was already setting up a camera, narrating the unbelievable story of a homeowners association buried, literally, under its own trash. Meanwhile, Ethan sat on his porch just a few houses down, calm and collected. A mug of coffee in his hand, a half-smile on his face. The faint hum of engines echoed from the street as the city sanitation trucks finally arrived, this time heading straight toward the HOA office. He watched as men in reflective vests began shoveling and hauling the piles of garbage into their trucks. Karen stood helplessly on the curb, her pink suit stained and wilted in the heat. Ethan took a slow sip of his coffee and muttered under, his breath just loud enough for himself to hear. "Guess they finally picked up the trash." Weeks later, Maple Creek looked almost unrecognizable. The air was clean again, the lawns were freshly trimmed, and the memory of the Trash Mountain incident had slowly turned into neighborhood legend. The smell that once hung heavy in the air was gone, replaced by the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. Ethan stood on the curb one quiet Saturday morning, wearing work gloves and an old ball cap, helping a few of his neighbors set up blue recycling bins along the street. What started as a simple cleanup had turned into a community project. People who barely spoke before were now chatting, laughing, and working together. Even the kids were helping, riding around on their bikes, handing out bottles of water to the volunteers. His mom sat in a lawn chair nearby, wearing her big sun hat, gently patting the soil around a row of new marigolds and daisies she had planted, where the massive piles of garbage once stood. Her frail hands worked slowly, but there was peace in her movements. Ethan smiled every time he looked over and saw her there, restoring beauty where chaos had bloomed. Across the street, some of the same neighbors who had once complained about the smell were now waving and thanking him. "Hey, Ethan," one man called out, "you really turned this place around." Ethan chuckled. "Guess I just gave the HOA a little push to clean up." There was a quiet sense of redemption in the air. The board had replaced Karen with a new, more reasonable president, someone who actually listened. HOA meetings were now open for everyone to attend, and for the first time in years, people actually wanted to go. Ethan picked up the last few bags of recycling and straightened up. The distant hum of an approaching engine grew louder, the familiar rhythmic beeping of a garbage truck reversing. He looked up and couldn't help but grin. The truck rolled slowly toward his driveway, the morning sun glinting off its windshield. The driver leaned out the window and honked twice, not in warning this time, but in greeting. Ethan raised his hand and waved. The man laughed, shouting, "Don't worry, we got you on the list again, buddy." Ethan watched as the mechanical arms lifted his trash bins and emptied them cleanly into the truck. It was such a simple thing, trash being picked up. But after everything that had happened, it felt like closure. He looked around at the spotless street. The freshly painted mailboxes, the neighbors chatting near their lawns. His mom smiled from her chair, dirt still on her hands, and nodded approvingly. As the truck drove away, the camera would slowly pan upward, following its path down the long, peaceful road. The faint beeping of the garbage truck faded into soft, calm music. Birds circled overhead, and the sunlight shimmered on the roofs of tidy houses.